So, for people who know very little about this game, or a lot, Cue Cards is a game where every card is a real thing in the real world that costs energy and has a certain amount of power. Your objective in the game is to outpower your opponent by the end of the round. If you have more power on the board than your opponent by the end of the round, you win the round. Win 3 rounds, you win the game. I'm here today because maybe you're looking for some amazing cards you could be using. Now, a list of the best cards in any card game is pretty opinion-based because you can play your deck completely differently than I ever play my decks. Sometimes you build around just a category. Sometimes you build around just a card. Some cards are useless unless they're played with other cards. So the value of a lot of cards in a game like this are pretty based on how you play your hand. But what I'm gonna do for you today is give you in no particular order 10 cards in every rarity level that I enjoy. Mind you, I'm also still pretty new to this game. I've only been in it a couple weeks. So there are definitely cards that I've still never heard of, but of the ones that I have heard of, I'm gonna give those to you now. Starting with common cards. Cheese Rolling. When played on the first turn of a round, give this card 200 power this turn. When returned to the deck, give yourself minus 80 power per turn for the rest of the round. I love this card, especially in League, because in casual play, if it costs 7 energy to play a 7 energy card, that blows. But in League, sometimes you get like 40 energy per turn, so 7 energy means nothing. So being able to just throw up 200 power out of nowhere is fantastic. I cheated a little bit, this next one's a combo. The Heart Nebula and the Soul Nebula. When they're played together, they give the other card plus 30. There are a lot of combos that you can do in this game, and this is one of the first ones that I discovered and fell in love with. So for 9 energy, you're putting out 130 power, which is pretty great. The Shiba Inu. Well in your hand, this card generates 6 power per turn. That's just lovely. So this card is a win-win because you benefit from it staying in your hand, and as long as it's in your hand, you get to look at a Shiba Inu. Dead Drops. I love cards like this one. When drawn, give a random card in your hand plus 50 power, and give this card minus 50 power this turn. This is beautiful because it can give plus 50 power to a very already overpowered card. The only negative side I've ever seen to this card is sometimes this card can be a little stinker and give the 50 power back to itself so nothing happens. But even if that happens, it has 70 power overall, so it's not horrible. Paper. This card is weird, and I love it. It has 0 power, but there are a bunch of cards out there that can give this card power. When drawn, it gives Paper plus 20 power. When played and returned to your hand, it gives it plus 20 power. This card is a card that you would want to build a deck around, and I think that that's amazing. I love that there's a card like this where it's like, yeah, this card is worthless, but you can really rack up points and make this card really awesome. Triceratops. This card is probably the #1 card that I've pulled the most. I have like 80 of it. That doesn't mean it's bad though, it's just common. When played, your cards have plus 10 power this turn. I'll take plus 10 power any day of the week. I mean, it's just gonna boost my hand a little bit, and that's fantastic, especially if you're in the lead, because plus 10 isn't a lot, but it can be what keeps you at the top. Dreyfus Model 500. When played, give this card plus 10 power for the rest of the game. The reason I like this card is because it already starts at 99 power. For a common card, that's great. And to give itself more power from being played, that's great. If you have any cards that can lower the energy that it takes to play this card, you're doing well. Forget-Me-Not. When returned to the deck, if you lost this turn, give this card plus 60 power until played. So, reasons I love this card. No matter what, it's gonna do 40 damage. And if for some reason 40 damage keeps you losing, it's gonna do 100 damage the next time you get to play it. Fin Whale. This card is a bit of a catch-22 because when drawn, it gives other cards minus 100 this turn, which means when you draw this card, you're playing this card. The reason that's okay is because it's gonna do 100 damage. Thankfully, it only gives a minus 100 for the turn, so you're not screwed with your hand. Hairy Frogfish. When drawn, this card has 60 power this turn. So this is another card that you're playing when you pull it because it only has 60 power when you pull it. But personally, from the way I play, I really like cards that have when drawn effects, and I really like cards like this that are just like, oh yeah, you know you're playing me when you pull me. Now onto the rare category. The Sirens. This one is in a lot of my decks right now. When drawn, steal 15 power from cards in your opponent's hand and give it to this card until played. This is great. It activates as soon as you pull the Sirens card. It takes power away from your enemy, and it stays on this card until you can play it. So you're not screwed if you can't play it the turn that you draw it. I'm sorry if I botched the name. Akechi Mitsuhide. When played, reduce the power of a random card in your opponent's hand by 20 for the rest of the game. That's why I love this card. You could hit a card that has 20 power in their hand and make it worthless for the rest of the game. Jack Frost. When drawn, lock a random card in your opponent's hand for the rest of the round. You know me, I like the when drawn effects, and I adore the lock effect, especially because I've seen it used against me too many times, and I hate when it's used against me. Flying Cloud. When returned to the deck, give this card 100 power for the rest of the game. Two reasons I love this card. One, there's already a benefit of once you've played it and it's coming back, the second time you play it, it's gonna have 100 power. But in League, when you can get rid of cards faster, there's a chance that you get to play this card a third time, which means that it would be doing 200 damage that time. Traffic Lights. While in your hand, at the start of each turn, give this card plus 12 power until played. I love cards like this. I actually haven't played with Traffic Lights, but there's a card that I'm gonna mention later that I think this is the same effect of. And if it is the same effect of, where that's 12 every single turn piling on top of itself, that's magnificent. Because if you pull this card early and you hold it for like 3 rounds, this card goes from 24 power to a lot higher than 24 power in a very quick amount of time. If I'm wrong on that, and it does only gain plus 12 and goes up to 36 and then just sits at 36 until it's played, that's okay, it's still on the list, it's just not as cool as I thought it was. The South Pole. 0 energy, 0 power. When drawn, give this card 30 power and increase the energy cost by 2 for the rest of the game. Again, the when drawn effect. But I also love a card that starts stockpiling. So it's gonna go 30 power, 2 energy, 60 power, 4 energy, 90 power, 6 energy, and it's gonna keep going. The Eastern Quoll. When returned to the deck, if you lost this turn, give your opponent 2 energy per turn for the rest of the round. Now, I typically don't like having cards that if I lose or if I do whatever, it benefits my opponent, because I've seen that happen against people I'm playing and they benefit me and then it gives me a huge advantage over them out of nowhere. You've just got to know the right time to play this card. If you're down 100, it costs 7 energy, you probably know that you're going to lose, and if you use it to catch up, that's totally okay, but you know the repercussions of it. Triathlon. When drawn, lock a random card in your opponent's hand, give another one minus 10 power, and increase the energy cost of another one by 1, all for this turn. I know it's only for 1 turn, but you're really messing with your opponent's hand for 1 turn. Also, this card does 78 damage anyway, so that's fantastic. When played, if you're losing this round, it has triple its basic power, which is an additional 60 power. So no matter what, you have this card, it does 30 power. But if you're losing, all of a sudden, it's gonna do 90 power. You could be behind a little bit, and this card could all of a sudden give you a big advantage. Genetic Engineering. When drawn, give this card minus 20 power and give it to a random card in your hand for the rest of the game. When you can give one of my cards plus 20 power for the rest of the game, thank you. Now on to the epic category. Dalmatian. When drawn, give this card 99 power this turn, which puts it at 101 power. Great reference. I'll take it. The Flamboyant Tree. I accidentally only found this one because I misread what it does. When drawn, burn 40 power per turn this card until played. At first, I misread it and I thought it was burning the opponent's hand 40 power per turn, which I was like, oh my god, thank you, yes. And then I was like, oh my god, no, it's not. This card is going down every turn that I don't play it. But that's okay, because it starts at 110 power, so I'll just play it the first time I pull it, thank you very much. Raphael. Now this is a card that if you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend this card. When drawn, burn 14 power per turn in your opponent's cards until played. And then if they have Michelangelo, even if it's in their deck, give it minus 30 power until played. I'm mainly focused on the first part of this effect. This card, when you pull it, sets your opponent's hand on fire. And your opponent's hand is on fire until they play all of those cards. Which means that if they don't play their cards, or if they don't look at how long that effect lasts, they might just have 3 cards in their hand that stay at 0 power until they play them. And they might have like 9 energy. You might ruin their hand from the very beginning. The set of all sets. This is the card that if Traffic Lights has this ability, Traffic Lights is amazing. Well, this is in your hand. At the start of each turn, give this and a random card in your hand plus 7 power for the rest of the game. Oh my god, I love this card. Especially if you get it early game. Every single turn, this card gains plus 7 power, and a random card in your hand gains plus 7 power. And just like Dead Drops does that cheeky thing sometimes this card just gives itself plus 14 instead of giving 7 to another card. And by round 3 or 4, if you had this round 1, this card's doing well over 100 damage, and it's awesome. Hamburger. Okay, so at the moment that I'm taping this, this card is very popular right now. When played, give your other cards 35 power this turn. Give this card minus 20 power this turn. So although Hamburger goes down, whatever you play with it is gaining 35 power. The Gila Monster. I did a project on the Gila Monster in 5th grade. When drawn, if you're losing the turn, give this card 40 power until it's played. If you're winning, give a random card in your opponent's hand minus 20 power until it's played. The reason I love this card is it has an if you're winning and an if you're losing effect, and both of them benefit you. QR code. When played, give your opponent's cards minus 10 power this turn. If it's the first turn of a round, give them an extra minus 10 power. If it's round 1, give them an extra minus 15 power this turn. Which means if this is the very first card that you play, your opponent's cards in round 1 all have minus 35 power. And even if it's not the very first turn of round 1, your opponent's cards are going to be losing power when you play this card, and those are always fantastic. Gridiron Football. When returned to the deck, gain 6 power per turn for the rest of the round. If you won this turn, gain an additional 7 power for the rest of the game. Again, rest of the game effect. That's why it's on this list. Gaining 7 power for the rest of the game could be what helps you keep a lead in later rounds. You never know. Medusa. When drawn, lock 2 cards in your hand and give 2 cards 50 power for the rest of the round. This is a card that I also haven't played yet, but I'm very, very invested in this card. I love the idea of giving 2 of my cards plus 50 power for the round. The only caveat with this is since I haven't played it, I don't personally know if it can give that plus 50 to a card that it locks. It probably can. I'm just gonna say that, it probably can. Either way, it's not statistically likely it's gonna give plus 50 to both of the cards it locks, so plus 50 to some card that you're gonna play, that to me is fantastic. Power of 0. When drawn, give your opponent's cards with 50 power or higher minus 49 power, and decrease their energy cost by 1 for the next 2 turns. So even though it'll be easier for them to play those cards, it could take away all of the power in their hands. It could make those cards like 3 power, 4 power. They may be able to play those cards, but you might all of a sudden just overpower them this round. Now on to the legendary cards. Phoenix. If you like Raphael as much as I do, you're gonna want Phoenix also. When drawn, burn 14 power per turn on all cards in your opponent's hand until they're played. If you're losing this round, burn 14 power per turn on them again. I love this card so much, it's in every single one of my decks. This, Raphael, Set of All Sets, those are in all of my decks. I love those three so much. Dire Wolf. People have been going crazy for this card. When drawn, give all of your cards in hand 16 power until play. When returned to your deck, give your opponent's cards in hand and on board -4 power until played. Again, this is the kind of card that I like. It has an ability that's positive for you when you draw it, and it has an ability that's positive for you when you play it. So that's great, and it's doing 50 damage when it plays, and for that plus 16 to all the cards in your hand, it gives 16 to itself. So it's also going up. Godzilla. This is a card that you have to have in your league deck when energy doesn't matter. It does 140 damage off of the bat for 12 energy, but 140 damage. And when it's returned to your deck, it gains 20 more power for the rest of the game. So when you can play it multiple times, when you're getting boosts matching arena, I've had it so that this card on its own does 250 damage when I play it. Jade Emperor. This is a very similar effect to a Mythic card, where if you can't get a Mythic card, I heavily recommend this card because this is quietly magnificent. It only costs 1 energy and it only does 1 power. But when returned to your deck, if you won the turn, give all of your common, rare, and epic cards, even in your deck, 15 extra power until play. This is amazing. Maybe you have a huge lead and they're gonna throw away the turn. Play this and your cards, all common, rare, and epic, are gonna gain 15 power the next time that you play them. Pika! This is a card that I want so badly. I don't have it, but everybody wants it and I can't get it because it's so rare right now. When you play this card, it steals 7 power from all of your opponent's cards in their hand and in play, and it keeps it for itself for the rest of the game. So this card just shoots up 35 power when played, every time it's played, mind you, and it's stealing 7 power from all of your opponent's cards in play and in hand. The Arabian Horse. This is another one people love right now. When played, if you're winning the round, this card gains an extra 100 power this turn. The reason that's already crazy is it already has 80. So if you're able to play this card, it's gonna have 180 damage going out there. Giant's Causeway. When returned to the deck, give all of your opponent's cards -20 power next turn. And if you won the turn, give them an extra -10. So if you win the turn, all of your opponent's cards are gonna have -30 power next turn. Parasitic Jaeger. When returned to your deck, if you lost this turn, your opponent has -30 power per turn for the rest of the round. So unlike Giant's Causeway, where if you win, they're gonna do -30 next turn, this one, if you lost, your opponent's screwed. Earth. When drawn, gain 4 energy. I know that doesn't sound like a lot compared to a lot of the cards that I've already mentioned, but there are a lot of perks here. It only costs 3 energy to play Earth, so it's not taking up a lot of space in your hand and it's easy to get back again. Also, +4 energy in a casual game can be a lifesaver. Sydney Opera House. When played, give your cards +10 power and your opponent's cards -10 power this turn. So all of a sudden, their hand is worse, your hand is better. Obviously, that's just fantastic. Next, since there aren't that many Ultra Fusion cards, I combined Fusion and Ultra Fusion into a list of 10. The Brain. When drawn, give all of your cards, even if they're in your deck, +23 power, and lock this card for 2 turns. When returned to your deck, lock a random card left in your opponent's hand next turn. Reasons I love this one. Your hand gains power. Fantastic. You don't need to play this card right away. And when you're able to play it, it doesn't cost a lot. 3 energy, that's nothing. And when you finally do play it, it's gonna lock something in their hand. Honey Badger. When returned to your deck, if you won the turn, burn 25 power per turn of your opponent's cards until played. If you lose, burn 15 power per turn yours instead. This one is risky, and like I said, I don't usually like to play cards that can negatively affect you, but a lot of the hands that I make, I will know when to play this card and know that I will be winning the turn when I play this card. You're gonna get the effects of like Phoenix and Raphael. 25 power per turn is fantastic. I'm pretty sure both of them only do 14 power per turn. Purple Emperor. When returned to your deck, give this card 100 power for the rest of the game if you lose the turn. So the really good thing about a card like this is if it's a game that you're struggling in, it's fantastic knowing a card just gave you an additional 100 power that you can play next time you pull it. The Renaissance. When drawn, give all of your arts and culture cards, even if they're in the deck, plus 10 power until played. If your deck contains 6 or fewer art and culture cards, give them an additional 18 power. Now I really tried to avoid putting cards that were very category specific into this list. The ones that it's like, hey, if you have bird cards, give it plus 10 power. If you have a boat, give it plus 10 power. Because those are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I was just trying to play a lot of universal cards. But when it comes to fusion and ultra fusion cards, all of a sudden, if you have really good art and culture cards, they could have up to plus 28 power until play. I might say this wrong, but the Therizinosaurus, when played, your opponent's cards have minus 20 power this turn. This is on here because this is one of the first fusion cards I got, and I've seen it benefit me greatly in games. I know it costs 9 power, but especially in a league game, it's gonna do 70 damage on its own, and it's gonna take away 60 damage that your opponent's gonna do to you. Bald Eagle. When drawn, your life on land cards cost 3 less energy until played. Again, I tried to avoid the ones that are very category specific, but again, this is a big deal. If you drop the energy of life on land cards by 3, take the Dalmatian card, which is going to get 101 damage when you draw it. The Eastern Quoll, which is going to do 100 damage already on its own. Maybe a card like the Badger, which could potentially do 100 damage. Now you lowered those energy by 3. All of a sudden you can play all 3 at the same time, and you're doing 300 plus damage on that one turn? Because this Eagle made it easier on you? This Eagle is worth mentioning. Hypernova. When drawn, give this card 100 power this turn. Again, this is huge in League because that's going to give it 150 power for the turn. And if it's not in League, then it's going to do 50 power on its own. So that alone is already great too. The Large Hadron Collider. If you play this card on the first turn of a round, it has 128 power. Being able to play this card on the first turn of a round in League is very easy. Again, because energy, most of the time, doesn't matter. Stampede. When played, give all of your life on land cards, even in the deck, plus 25 power and lose 2 energy per turn for the rest of the round. As far as I know, every time that I've been able to play this card, this has been one of my favorite Ultra Fusion cards. Hands down. This card has made my hand way stronger than I ever anticipated when I'm playing against other people. That being said, I know I said a lot of this list is opinion based. You can like your own cards and dislike your own cards, but no matter what anybody else tells you, this next card might be the strongest card in the game. A Christmas Carol. Look at that. It starts with 180 damage, and it costs 1. When drawn, increase the energy cost of all of your cards by +1 until they're played. Now that doesn't sound great. And it also isn't great for this card, because all of a sudden it costs 2 to play this card. But you've got Godzilla, he costs 12. You've got this card, he costs 1. You draw him, all of a sudden costs 2. Godzilla costs 13. Oh, that's 15. Oh, but you're in a league where energy, again, I've said this a lot, it doesn't matter. This card's doing 180. Godzilla's doing 140 plus. Oh my god. Now on to Mythics. I own, I think 3 Mythics. So I haven't played with these cards, but I have played against them, unfortunately. Loch Ness Monster. When it returns to your deck, lock the cards remaining in your opponent's hand next turn. I've had this where I play one card, and they played the Loch Ness Monster, and it locks all 4 of my cards, so I have to play the one I draw. And it might not be a good card to play, and I might not even be able to play it. The Ark of the Covenant. I heard rumors that this might be the best Mythic card? I don't know. When drawn, give a random card in your hand plus 70 power until played. That does sound like pretty good to me. Plus 70 power until played on any of my cards is a good day for me. The Holy Grail. It costs 30 energy to play this, and it does 300 damage. And there are cards out there that lower the energy it takes to play this card, but 300 damage! When drawn, give all of your brilliant human body cards, even if they're in the deck, plus 28 power until played. I'll be honest, I never read that description. I'm focused on the fact that it does 300 damage. the fact that it also has an ability, in my mind, makes it without a doubt the best Mythic card you could ever ask for. The Grim Reaper. When played, give a random card in your opponent's hand minus 50 power for the rest of the game. Again, that's huge, because you could attack a very important card in their hand, and all of a sudden it has minus 50 power for the rest of the time that you're playing them. Mermaids. When played, give your fabulous fish cards plus 70 power this turn. When returned to the deck, reduce the energy cost of all ocean and sea cards, even in your deck, by 1 for the rest of this round. So, this is an example of a Mythic that is fantastic when you build the right deck. So if you build the right deck of fish cards and ocean cards and you throw Mermaid in there, Mermaid is very nice. Pandora's Box. When drawn, give a random card in your hand plus 80 power until it's played, and burn 35 power per turn, a random card in your hand until played. So although it's going to burn away the power of one of your cards, another one of your cards is going to get plus 80 power, which is more than what the Ark of Covenant can promise you. Atlantis. When returned to the deck, this card costs 7 less energy next time it's played, which is phenomenal, because all of a sudden you're saying that a card that costs 9 energy and does 90 damage is going to cost 2 energy and do 90 damage. The Flying Dutchman. When played, if you're losing the round, give your cards plus 48 power this turn. If you're winning, give your Plundering Pirates cards, even if they're in the deck, plus 36 power this turn and next. So this is a good card to build around, and also a good card to have in general. Because if you don't have Plundering Pirates, you can still benefit from it if you're losing. Like, when played, your Amazing Astronaut cards get 70 power until played. I know that's very specific to Amazing Astronauts, which doesn't sound fantastic, but all of those astronauts, who I'm pretty sure are already pretty good power-wise, gaining 70 power, not to mention, this bad boy already has 84 power, and I've never played him, but I'm pretty sure he counts as an Amazing Astronaut, correct me if I'm wrong, which would mean that he also gets 70 power. Even if I'm wrong on that, and he doesn't, 84 power is great. Nazca Lines. This is one of the only Mythics that I own. When returned to your deck, give all of your common cards 20 power, your rare cards 10 power, and your epic cards 5 power, even if they're in your deck until played. Now this one is weird to me, because you remember the Jade Emperor that I mentioned before? He gives 15 power to everybody. I understand that the circumstances have to be specific, but I don't understand why everything in this one, it's not like, yeah, 15, but now the epic cards get 20. Like, something like that, or maybe like, for the rest of the game, it says they get it until played. It should be like for the rest of the game or something to really put itself over Jade Emperor. But this is what I'm saying. Jade Emperor isn't a Mythic card, so the fact that this is and that's not, so Jade Emperor is a lot easier to obtain, I would heavily suggest that you go out and get Jade Emperor. Okay, so that was a huge list for me to start you off with, and was it every card that I love? No. Was it every card that I play with? No. Was it every card that you desperately wanted me to say and I didn't include in the category? And you're like, why didn't you do that? You're insane. You're so wrong. No. And I might not even have heard of the card that you're talking about. And if that's the case, and you need to let me know, please leave it in the comments, because like you, I love this game, and I would love to know all of the cards that I'm missing out on. And this is my way of hopefully giving you some insight to cards that maybe you're missing out on. Or if you're new to this game, maybe all of a sudden you saw a card that you really want to build a deck around, or you saw a couple of cards that you're going to just start throwing into decks that you're currently working with. Also, if you want to see me do a video that's just around history cards or paleontology cards, or deck building videos where I build an entire deck around paper and then play with it, or frogs and play with it, again, let me know. Suggest that in the comments. I will gladly do it. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I could introduce you to some new cards, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.